Hey everyone, my name is Pavlos Konstas. I'm a resident entrepreneur at Harvard Innovation Labs, building on the medical and healthcare AI space. I'm really excited to be chairing this panel because I think every time we talk about scaling AI, we start with that very uncomfortable number, and it really depends on which report you've read, maybe McKinsey, BCG, Gartner, or whichever else, but about 70 to 80% of AI pilots don't actually get into production. They get built, they get demoed, they get applauded in a boardroom perhaps, and Kostas next to me, he's a board member, he can attest to that, but then they quietly disappear. And yet, every executive is asked to spend more on AI this year than last, and that trend keeps going. So I think there is a mismatch between the ambition and the expectation and reality, and that mismatch perhaps is quite different to test an AI application in a controlled environment, in a demoable environment, and actually create a system that changes how business runs. So that gap, how it's created, how it's mitigated, who is doing it well, is exactly what we're going to be discussing in this panel. And I'm very lucky because I think we have the entire AI stack in one room, right? If you think about it. So I'll start from my left to right. So I have Kostas Mallios next to me. He's been at Applied Materials for a good number of years, technology executive and board member. And actually, Applied is the company that makes the equipment, that makes the silicon, that makes AI possible. To Dino from Qualcomm that is putting AI into billions of devices on devices at the edge of the network. And then on the demand side, we have Klistenis from Viohalco, who's trying to deploy AI in more than a dozen of companies, all of them with their own operating model, a different plan formation, and in different geographies. And George, who is trying to operationalize AI perhaps in the most regulated environment in the economy, right? So this is the entire AI stack. So I'm really excited, to get into the nitty-gritty, not the marketing version of, what makes, what breaks, how do we make it work, and what should the audience be looking for and have their eyes open over the next, whatever. I would say, before I would say 18 months, but now I have to say the next 6 months, because things are moving so fast that I don't really know, if anyone can predict the future. So starting with Costa, so you were sitting on the upside of that, on the upstream of that AI economy, right? And you've seen perhaps the most sophisticated, the most engineering advanced organizations. If they can effectively scale AI, what does everyone else get wrong? What's your perception? It's like how. What the history has shown. Basically.
Yeah, it's, thanks for having us. It's actually quite interesting. I think people assume that the most sophisticated manufacturing organizations, in the case of semiconductor companies, for example, that operate in the nanosphere, 4 atoms at a time, that they have it all figured out. And the reality is they don't. This is the good news and the bad news. AI has done an amazing job of making it accessible for everyone, from a school child to a manufacturing of semiconductors. But the reality is to get the discipline right, to incorporate the right level of architecture, the right level of economics, that produces the right level of scalability is actually quite hard. So I talked to a lot of companies. I'm on the board of several companies. And when you talk to them and you think that the hype actually matches reality, stop. Because it really doesn't. And everyone is having a hard time. So if you're having a hard time in your own companies, don't feel left out, because there's a lot that's going on. But fundamentally, in order to get AI to scale, you have to treat it as an economics opportunity. It's not a technology exercise. It's not the sexiness of software, et cetera. Think about it as a systems level problem, which is an automation opportunity that will just increase productivity, that bringing together talent, bringing together resources, the right levels of equipment, the right levels of data will actually produce the benefit that we all hear about. But it's not easy.
Definitely not. Definitely not. And I think that's a good segue to Dino, because obviously, like Qualcomm works and deploys and with thousands of OEMs, like in deploying AIs for devices at scale. So what separates the one who actually get AI right, they're able to put it into production, and the ones who get trapped in that siloed frenzy of pilots and, like endless experimentation, let's call it. Do you think it's an architectural problem, it's basically, or an organizational, behavioral, cultural problem, or both, maybe? What have you seen in terms of, examples that you can share with the audience?
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. Yeah, I think it is both. It is both architectural and organizational. I think we think a lot about this at Qualcomm, and specifically, I've spent a lot of time thinking about it. I think the main issue is we create our own purgatory with these pilots, right? And it's a self-inflicted wound. What happens is normally, we say we're going to do a pilot program. There is, an unlimited amount of compute capability, unoptimized models. A nice demo is shown at an internal meeting or a conference, and then we say, okay, now we're ready to go and deploy, right? And the reality is when you have to deploy across billions of devices, whether it's PCs or wearable devices or automobiles, suddenly that model breaks down fundamentally. And it comes down to really two things. I think probably half the problem is architecture, and half is organizational. So from an architecture perspective, it's really about if you try to take those, that pilot program or those unoptimized models and try to run those on hardware, you'll probably end up with 15 or 20 minutes with a battery life, and then the whole concept of how this can be a persistent experience with you goes away. And so it fails. I think the second piece is it's not just about, so you have to become very intimate with the silicon and take advantage of the capabilities there. On the organizational front, I think it's thinking about the ecosystem very differently. So it's not about how do you have a 100% cloud-based model, but it's about how can you enable an ecosystem of developers, whether it's hardware or software, so they can build on a framework that may be based off of many architectures and different devices that allows you to scale. So in total, you need to be able to solve that problem, or what ends up happening is kind of the problems that many enterprises see, which is a failure, maybe not meeting expectations, and then it falls apart.
Okay. I mean,
what's interesting that Dino said is, the word pilot, I think, is really overused. Yeah. In fact, AI should be an integral part of the organization. And so when we in the past have done pilots, you think of them as pilots, but you should be thinking about them as a production system from the get-go, from the beginning. And that's what at Applied, that's what we learned.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I think the main thing I think about is you think about AI as sort of the core, not the add-on, and then you have to build a physical infrastructure around that to actually take advantage of that tool.
Okay, I fully agree with that, because when something, I think we can all agree in this panel that what is overhyped is actually the word pilot, right? Because what pilot means is something that I will allocate a specific amount of money without disturbing my operating model. I can be crazy about it. I can, go on in tangents, but it doesn't touch my operations, so I'm okay. But the moment it starts to touch my operations, then it gets, like who is paying for it? What's the ROI? And actually, again, thank you, because you're giving me, really good segues to George, because basically, thinking about it, banks have everything, right? They have the data, they have the capital, they have the use cases. Probably, it's the most advanced vertical in the economy, right? But heavily regulated as well. So what do you think, like from what you've heard from Costa and Dino, is basically the secret ingredient between productionizing AI and getting out of that pilot trap? And if you have any, perhaps, specific examples to showcase of what you do at NBG?
I agree with what Dino and Kostas said before. I mean, when we starting a pilot, usually we try to test the technology to investigate if it is capable enough to support our use case. And then we try to deploy it, and sometimes we fail. And we fail because the environment, it is not prepared to use and consume the technology yet. And it's okay, because usually we have a chain. We have a chain with people, with data, with systems, with constraints, with regulation, security, etc. It is not only technology. Technology, it is just a link on the chain, but all the rest, it is not yet prepared. So we have seen that there are, to be honest, at NBG, we are lucky enough to not have any more legacy systems. We have clean and tidy data, but of course, we are subject of strict regulation, and we are also exposed to, let's say, sometimes ultra-legacy processes. And we realized that one of the most common root causes for failures when we try to deploy an AI pilot, an AI solution, is when we try to inject AI technology in processes without redesign them before. Yeah. So it is not so easy to just get a process designed around paper and designed around manual information extraction and change it just injecting AI technology. This is one reason. Another reason is when we try to, let's say, use pre-built solutions, when we try to buy off-the-shelf solutions and apply to the organization, regardless the readiness of the organization to accept and adopt the solution. And we believe that AI is a new technology. There are not established products or use practices yet, so everything needs a kind of customization. And so I believe you are right. Technology, it is not an issue, but the environment built around the old technology is an issue when you try to deploy and scale new solutions. Sorry.
Oh, he cannot be heard? I hear you, and actually, I think there is abundance of technology, right? There is an abundance of solutions. So, and that dilemma between off-the-shelf versus customization, I don't know if there is a single answer to this. I think we've gone from the hyper-customized era to the off-the-shelf era. Don't touch it; it works perfectly. To kind of a hybrid, as you said, right? And I'm going to use the word legacy that I know banks are desperately trying to get away from. As I go into the heavy industrial world, which perhaps, I don't know, I think it still is the paradigm, right? And Clisteni, you're overseeing dozens of companies, each of them with different plants in different geos, with their own operating model, with their own ways of working, with their own systems. How does that work? How can you kind of build something that can be productionized across your portfolio? Is that even possible? And is there a common reason why it fails, or it's just case by case, depending on the line, the company,
Yeah, so first of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I feel much better after hearing these guys talk about their problems as well, because I thought it's slightly on our own. So I think there's two fundamental problems that we found as well. As you rightly said, we operate 32 factories in many geographies, primarily in metals processing, but each one of these segments is fundamentally different to the other. So there's a lot of know-how that is localized into the factories. So what we found is that usually AI or the technology is really the problem these days. AI works, but what it has shown to us is that you lack a lot of other fundamental infrastructure that you need to support AI when it's time to productionize. What we found is that organizations like ourselves are not ready many times to operationalize at scale. And what that means is that it's very easy these days to go into a factory and do a fantastic pilot, like root cause analysis, value stream mapping, visual inspection, you name it, right? Everything's fantastic, but this is much like a honeymoon period. Everything is like a small box, everything's enclosed, your data is curated, the CISO is not knocking on your door shouting, no one's complaining about your technology stack, so everything's fantastic. And then comes the time that you say, okay, I need to make this part of my day-to-day decision-making and operations. And this is where things start to actually fall off a bit, if you wish. And that's what we found, that you need very strict data management, data governance. You need very strict change management. People need to understand how this is going to impact their lives, and many times we're very bad at communicating this. We need very strict governance. How do we make these changes? So I think all of these factors combined, they tend to actually drive a lot of the pilots to the wall, and I'm sorry for using the term pilot again. And the other thing that we found is that many times we fail to link a pilot to an actual business need that we can measure it and see how it gets better. Because we get into the hype, well, okay, let's do this pilot, it looks fantastic, but does it actually solve something? Because experimenting is fantastic and we should be doing it, and we are doing it, but I think ultimately these sort of pilots should answer a very simple question, right? Which is like, where does this tie to a business or a financial need? And how does it make it slightly better? Because this is what gets you a lot of buy-in from up the chain and then helps you build the foundations I mentioned before. I think this is where we get it convoluted sometimes.
Okay.
How do you guys go from the pilot thinking to the production? Because you said something earlier when we were preparing. You said, manufacturing is the front line of the business in your case, and you have a very reputable company. How do you guys go from the pilot to the production?
So it's tricky. It's tricky. So usually it's with a lot of tears, but even without that, it's like, so we need to build a model that actually is like a hub and spoke sort of wheel, because you need a lot of the support from the center, but then obviously you need to be very close to the factory. And what we miss, and I said that's literally like when you are like on the on the corporate services, is you need to be right next to the guy in the factory, because this is, if you don't get his buy-in and his support, and then obviously by proxy the factory manager, there's no way you can actually productionize this. And then you should be there ready to inject with any sort of support that you can, from a fundamentals perspective, to make this scale up.
And do you find that there's resistance from the floor? There's sort of the AI bubble where everyone is.
So occasionally we
don't want his colleagues to get upset. Everyone is working.
There's no one here from Yocalis. Good.
No, we do have resistance, right? And I think it's natural, because I think it will tie down to the other point I mentioned. Whatever we make as a pilot needs to get into the day-to-day operations of the factory eventually. If you are doing this for 30 years, you know this inside out, you run the maths in your head, the model is practically yours. And I come to you and say, yeah, this tiny little thing here is going to make it 20% more efficient. It's very hard to actually sell this. So it has, and that's why I said it has a very big degree of change management associated with it.
So, I mean,
Everywhere.
what I hear is that pilots can turn into a death by 1,000 cuts, and what we shouldn't underestimate is that there is a very specific department, call it IT, call it digital, like enablement, whatever it is, that gets very tired sometimes. And so when you actually find, that one use case that you can productionize, you're like, we've been over, 100 use cases this year, and, like, give us a break. So mindful of our people as well, right? So I want to shift gears quickly, because I know we're pressed on time as well, on the insights that this panel can offer. And so starting with Costa, we are in an environment that changes rapidly, right? From compute economics to architectural shifts. What should enterprise buyers like Clisthenes should be looking out for over the next 2-3 years? And what assumptions made today you think are going to be aging badly very, very soon?
Yeah. I spent 20 years at Microsoft here and there, but the thing I remember that Bill used to say all the time is people underestimate what will happen in 10 years, but they deeply overestimate what will happen in 3. And so I think this, again, the beauty of AI is that it's accessible to everyone. The bad thing about AI is that it can have huge impact, but it will take time. And I think just be realistic about you're changing fundamental processes at a system level, on an architectural level, at an economic level in a company, and that takes time. That's culture change. Culture change, they used to say, takes a generation. It won't take a generation. There's too much ROI at stake with AI. But I think that's the number one thing, is keep your expectations in check. Number two, and this is what we were talking about earlier, is you need to include people that are both the dreamers and the doers. Yeah. And I think AI is an economic opportunity. Unless you have both at the table at the same time with cross-functional expertise at the onset, in day one, you're not going to get the level of benefit that people are expecting wildly sometimes, but even at the most basic level, it's just not going to happen. I think three, I think people are fascinated by models. You know, models are interesting, but that's not the game. The game is about when to use which model for which task. You know, it's not just about the the wow factor. It's about what will actually work. It's not about just deploying technology. And the last thing I could say is, and this is from my personal experience, people underestimate how much money it will cost. So, you know, people will go in. How many of you have, you know, underestimated what it would cost to do an AI deployment? Show of hands. Okay, there's more courage coming into the room.
Yeah.
That's good. But you know, I've heard some numbers in large companies, and the numbers are ridiculous. They're so low. They're so low. Yeah. Like, you're going to give me a 30% improvement in cost, and it's only going to cost me, I don't know, $7 million. That's a real number. $7 million for a multi-billion-dollar company. Wow, that sounds too good to be true. It sounds like it probably is. So I think just keep in mind that if you're going to have real outcomes, you need to have real investment. And you need to have to discipline all the way through to get that done, or else it's not going to happen. And it's going to fail and taint your ability to recover, because that's what happens.
So a 300K AI readiness is basically the tip of the iceberg. Just be prepared, right?
That's a signing bonus for the person to think about it.
Okay, I hear you. So I hear that, you know, like, as you say, you know, the AI case is effectively an economics case, and it should be regarded as that. So, Dino, make us the case for edge and on-device AI. Like, you know, when does the on-device inference becomes basically non-negotiable for scaling AI, and what should companies be thinking about when they design their AI stack to prepare for that?
Okay, so maybe a bit provocative, but I would say
Please
that there is a completely false narrative right now that's being perpetuated in the industry, that everything can be done on the cloud, right? So maybe that works today when a couple of customers or a couple of employees are doing some basic prompts, but now fast forward, we're talking about thousands of agents running simultaneously, right? Just the token cost alone will bankrupt your company. The ROI doesn't make any sense, right? So what you have to do is look at the problem a little differently. It's really not so much about, let me put everything in the cloud. It's like, how can I take advantage of these assets that I've deployed in the enterprise, whether they're laptops or other devices, and take advantage of the capability that are on those devices. So the real challenge is, how do you manage that orchestration? How do you manage that hybrid use of that capability? Because if everything you do is in the cloud, the economics don't make sense. You have, again, investments you've already made, you can take advantage of those. And then, but the challenge, the big investment, when we talk about it, is not going to be trying to figure out how to distill those LLMs onto devices. That's another myth, right? It's really going to be about very small language models, very purpose-built designs, kind of intentional design about what will run on device, and then maybe that'll be, you know, a majority of the capabilities. But then you'll always have to go back to the cloud. But it's that orchestration where I think the investment, the thought, the architecture, the design needs to happen. Yeah. If you go on a path where you will try to deploy everything in the cloud, I think you're not architecting for the future. You're basically creating a budget to bankrupt your company.
Yeah.
I just heard, this is, you just gave me a thing. I just heard one of the large AI companies that charges $20 a month for membership. You can probably figure it out, they're all about $20. Some of those accounts cost them $5,000 a month. Back to the token cost, right? That's not sustainable for any business. So these economics, going back to the economics and what you were saying, is spot on.
Unlimited power, unlimited compute. You know, that CapEx investment has to be funded.
Yeah, exactly. Unless, you know, we reach a point which hopefully we will reach with the abundance. You know, that word abundance keeps coming up in Silicon Valley, right? You know, abundance of energy, abundance of compute, abundance of data, storage, you know, like abundance of everything. So we are not there yet.
Well,
so like, Do you think that will ever happen?
And in reality, I think there's going to be natural governors. So I don't believe, just to maybe the counter argument, I don't believe it's a bubble.
Yeah.
Right? I think there are natural controllers that are going to make sure that engine doesn't overheat. For example, just energy creation. Right? It takes a decade to build that energy infrastructure. How to distribute that energy, how to build these buildings, right? How to populate the data centers with equipment. All this stuff takes time. So I think the demand is there. I think the slope that we're assuming is much more aggressive than what in reality will be, just because the practical nature of, hey, at the end of the day, we're in business to make money, right? So there's a freemium model that makes sense in order to capture that market share, but at the end, there's going to be a cost that these companies are going to have to pay for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And thinking about businesses who needs to make money, there are also businesses that need to satisfy regulators, right? So it's like, again, you know, like I want that dichotomy, like, is what I want to be discussing with George a bit. Like, if you can share like a genuine AI use case that you've scaled, you know, like at the bank, and then tell us about how you think the regulatory interventions, like all this AI Act, DORA, and everything else, you know, are they blocking, you know, the pace of adoption? Are they enabling it? Like, give us some view.
Okay. First of all, let's say that banks are, let's say, used to comply with regulation and all these constraints. It is not something new for us. Although I believe that AI technology is, let's say, the most advanced technology we have ever made. We expect to be the most regulated technology as well. But it is not, as I said before, regulation is not so much a constraint or an issue for us. We have today succeeded to deploy at scale few cases, mostly on our digital channels, on internal processes, and in the area of, let's say, software engineering department, how we automate software engineering processes. And actually, it is very interesting that key success factors for us, it was the alignment with the regulation from the beginning, the alignment with the transparency, let's say, principles of the organization, and the preparation of our technical teams to collect and develop internal know-how regarding the technology and avoid to just use pre-built and off-the-shelf solutions. That was the most critical parts for us, and not so much. We are not, let's say, distracted by regulation or kind of.
So I hear the empowering and enabling effectively an internal team, and that actually is quite straightforward when you're talking about like a one organization under one umbrella. How do you, Klisteni, like how do you do that? When you have a portfolio of companies with different headcounts, different budgets, etc., without duplicating the teams, right? You cannot have the same team times 12. But is it like a center of excellence? Is it like a federated model? What have you learned that works when you have a quite diversified portfolio as opposed to like one big unit like NBG, for example?
No, for us, I think we tried pretty much everything, but I think that the extremes doesn't work for us, right? So we went more towards the federated model. So we have a light team that sits centrally that deals with a lot of the intricacies that we discussed before, so like Sense AI policies, standards, data management, data governance, the prioritization frameworks, security, vendor management, etc. And then you need to have other satellite teams across the factories, because at the end of the day, this is where all the knowledge sits. This is, where I have Costa and Dino that they are, on the production line, and they know the intricacies of the actual problems, because these are the guys that they know where the bottleneck is, they know the process, they understand where there's value to be had. So you need to have a bit of a federated model that actually will cater for both of these. And as we've been experimenting with this, we've seen a couple of things. So first of all is that a good AI team isn't enough to scale these sort of things. So you mentioned it, right? Like 5 minutes ago, Costa, right? So you need you need the cross-collaboration of teams in order to scale these things up. So you need the business, you need the operations, you need IT, you need security, and then you need, of course, the AI team, all working together and bundling to make sure that this thing flies. And the other thing that we noticed as we move along this journey is that standardization starts to matter a lot. Because if you don't have some of these standard processes and the ways that you operate, be that your data management or like fundamental things like your platforms, then scaling becomes inefficient and extremely expensive. So I think that this is how we're treating it, and this is how we're going along with this.
Perfect. So I think we're at time, so I'd like to thank you very much for this interesting discussion. Thank you, everyone.